They say not all strays are looking for a home. Some are searching for something far more precious, something they lost centuries ago. On a frost-bitten November evening in the quiet suburb of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, 8-year-old Brenna Mosley made a choice that would tear open the veil between two ancient realms. The dog had been haunting their streets for weeks. Everyone had seen it. A creature that moved like smoke through the neighborhoods, its sleek dark fur catching moonlight, and its eyes. Those unsettling amber eyes that seemed to burn with centuries of sorrow and rage. While children like Eli and Kaya crossed to the other side of the street, their parents pulling them close with warnings of rabies and danger, while adults like Gwendolyn Henderson threw stones and shouted threats, Brenna saw something that made her chest ache. She saw a soul drowning in isolation. She saw pain so deep it transcended species. She saw what no one else could, or would acknowledge. This was no ordinary stray. "Mom, please," Brenna pleaded, her small hands trembling as she held the makeshift rope leash she'd crafted from her jump rope. Tears carved clean paths down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "He's all alone. He's starving. Nobody loves him." Joan Mosley looked from her daughter's desperate face to the creature sitting with impossible stillness at Brenna's feet. The dog's posture was wrong, too proud, too regal for a common mongrel. When its amber gaze locked onto Joan's, she felt her breath catch. Those eyes held intelligence, ancient intelligence, and something else, a plea that transcended words. Her husband Louis protested from the doorway, listing every rational reason to refuse. Their mortgage was underwater, Joan's hours at the diner had been cut, they could barely feed themselves, let alone a large dog. The neighbors were already hostile. But Joan found herself nodding yes before she understood why. None of them knew the truth. This creature that Brenna immediately named Max had walked the earth for over 400 years. He had once been Karpov Noctis, crown prince of the vampire kingdom, son of the formidable Lord Joran and the cruel Queen Vanita. He had commanded armies of the night, inspired fear across continents, and ruled with the cold efficiency his kind demanded. Until the witch Leisha took everything away. Her family had been casualties in a territorial war between vampire clans, innocents caught in crossfire, their blood spilled by Karpov's own hand during a raid he now barely remembered. Leisha's revenge was exquisite in its cruelty. She didn't kill him. Death would have been mercy. Instead, she crafted a curse more devastating than any blade, transformation into the weakest, most despised creature in vampire lore, a helpless dog dependent on others for survival. The curse came with impossible terms. It could only be broken by genuine love from a heart incapable of deception. In the vampire world, such purity was a myth. Love was manipulation. Kindness was exploitation. Compassion was weakness to be extinguished. Leisha ensured that Karpov would suffer this humiliation for eternity, among his own kind. But in her hatred, she made one critical miscalculation. She sent him to wander the mortal world. This is the story of an impossible bond, an ancient curse, and the family who risked everything for a creature they called Max. Never knowing he was a prince of darkness, waiting centuries for someone to prove that true compassion still existed in a cruel world. If this tale pulled you into the shadows this moment, don't slip away just yet. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your presence here keeps the story alive. Brenna convinced her reluctant parents to keep Max, but the moment he crossed the threshold of their modest home, Louis knew something was profoundly wrong. The dog was too quiet, too watchful. His amber eyes tracked every conversation as if he understood not just the words, but the meaning beneath them. When Brenna excitedly poured kibble into a bowl, Max approached, sniffed once, and turned away with what looked disturbingly like disdain. But when Joan set down a plate of rare steak left over from dinner, he devoured it with disturbing efficiency, his teeth tearing through meat in a way that seemed almost ritualistic. That first night, Brenna prepared a cozy bed in the corner of her room, patting the blankets and calling Max over with childish enthusiasm. He approached, lowered his head as if to lie down, then moved past the bed entirely to sit motionless by the window. For hours he remained there, staring at the moon with such heartbreaking loneliness that Joan found herself crying when she checked on them at midnight. The dog hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, just sat there like a statue carved from sorrow itself. Around 2 a.m, Louis woke to use the bathroom and froze in the doorway. Max was standing on his hind legs in front of the mirror above the sink, perfectly balanced, staring at the glass. But the mirror showed only the bathroom behind him. No reflection of the dog existed. Louis blinked hard, convinced he was dreaming. The dog turned slowly, and for just a heartbeat, Louis swore he saw a young man's face superimposed over the animal's features. Beautiful, anguished, and utterly inhuman. Then it was gone, and Max dropped to all fours, amber eyes meeting Louis's with something that looked like guilt and terror. Louis backed away without a word, his heart hammering. He didn't mention it to Joan the next morning, afraid she'd think him crazy. But he started watching Max differently, noticing things that shouldn't be possible. The way the dog never seemed to sleep, just closed his eyes when observed. The way he positioned himself between Brenna and any potential threat with military precision. The way shadows seemed to gather around him in the darkest hours, moving against the direction of light. Inside that canine prison, Karpov Noctis wrestled with sensations he'd thought dead. 407 years. 407 years of this degradation, this torture of being trapped in a form that couldn't speak, couldn't act, could barely survive without the mercy of creatures he'd once considered prey. He'd wandered through decades of human cruelty, kicked, starved, hunted, feared. He'd taught himself not to hope, not to feel, because hope was how Leisha truly won. But this child, this impossible, innocent child, who looked at him and saw something worth saving. When Brenna hugged him goodnight, whispering, "I'm so glad you're here, Max," something in his frozen chest cracked. The curse flickered, and for one agonizing moment, sensation flooded back, 4 centuries of suppressed emotion hitting him like a tidal wave. The pain was exquisite. The warmth was unbearable. He couldn't allow himself to feel. He couldn't allow himself to hope, because when this family inevitably abandoned him like all the others, the return to numbness might finally destroy what remained of his sanity. Word spread through Millbrook like wildfire. The Martinez family had taken in that thing, that creature everyone knew was wrong. By Monday morning, Brenna faced her first day back at school carrying the weight of her family's decision like a scarlet letter. Eli cornered her at recess, a cruel smirk twisting his features. "Hey, monster girl, how's your demon dog?" Ramon and Kaya circled behind her, cutting off escape routes with the practiced efficiency of experienced bullies. "Does it sleep in your bed? Does it growl at night? My mom says it's probably rabid." Their laughter cut deeper than their words. Brenna tried to defend Max, tried to explain that he was gentle and scared and good, but her voice cracked and tears betrayed her. The other children scattered when teachers approached, leaving her alone on the playground, marked as different, as other, as wrong for the simple act of compassion. At home, things deteriorated just as quickly. Gwendolyn Henderson stood on her porch across the street, clipboard in hand, intercepting neighbors as they passed. "We need to protect our children," she proclaimed with righteous conviction. "That animal is dangerous. It killed my cat." The lie spread effortlessly, repeated until people forgot it wasn't fact. "It growls at children," she added, conveniently omitting that those children had been throwing rocks at it. By Wednesday, she had 47 signatures demanding the dog's removal. Louis came home early on Thursday, his face ashen. His supervisor, Jesse, had pulled him aside, voice apologetic but firm. "Look, Lewis, the company's getting concerned. We heard about this animal situation at your house. It's a liability issue. We can't have someone on the crew who might bring that kind of trouble to a work site." The promotion he'd been promised, the one they desperately needed, went to someone else. Someone without a dangerous animal at home. Joan felt the chill at work too. Her friend Ivory stopped sitting with her during breaks, offering thin excuses and avoiding eye contact. Jan, the manager, cut her hours without explanation, though everyone knew why. The whispers followed her through the diner. "I heard it's possessed." "She's risking her daughter's life. What kind of mother chooses a dog over her child's safety?" That evening, the family ate dinner in oppressive silence. The bills were stacked on the counter, more red than white. The tension was suffocating. Max sat apart in the corner, watching them with eyes that held too much understanding, too much human sadness. He knew what he was costing them. He knew he should leave. But the curse held him there, dependent on their mercy, unable to free them from the burden of his existence. Brenna couldn't bear it. She slid from her chair and crossed to Max, wrapping her thin arms around his neck. "I don't care what anyone says," she whispered fiercely, her tears dampening his fur. "You're good. I know you are. We'll never give you up." Karpov felt the curse flicker, a brief, agonizing moment of returning sensation. The pain of feeling after centuries of emptiness nearly shattered him. Her love was breaking through the spell, and it terrified him more than the curse itself ever had. Strange phenomena intensified as the weeks passed, blurring the line between the mundane and the impossible. Brenna began having vivid nightmares that felt less like dreams and more like memories that didn't belong to her. A massive Gothic castle shrouded in perpetual darkness, its spires piercing a blood-red sky. A throne room where the floor was polished obsidian, reflecting crimson light from chandeliers made of bones and crystal, and always, at the center, a beautiful but terrifying young man, with amber eyes and a crown of shadows, sitting alone among corpses, his face twisted with anguish and rage. She would wake screaming, "Karpov!" though she'd never heard the name before, her sheets soaked with sweat. And every time, Max was there beside her bed, his massive form somehow comforting despite its strangeness. His amber eyes held concern that seemed impossibly human, and when she buried her face in his fur, she could swear she felt him trembling, as if the nightmares tormented him too. Joan couldn't shake her growing unease. During her shortened shifts at the diner, she used her phone to research, fingers flying across the screen between orders. She found something that made her blood run cold, local legends spanning decades about the Watcher. A mysterious dog sighted in various American cities from Boston to Seattle to New Orleans, always described identically, always alone, always with those unsettling amber eyes. The photographs were worse. Grainy images from the 1960s showed the same dog outside a jazz club. A Polaroid from the 1980s captured it near a subway station. A digital photo from 2010 showed it on a California beach. The same dog, completely unchanged, impossible and undeniable. Lewis, increasingly paranoid, set up a hidden camera in the living room, angling it to capture where Max slept. The next morning, he reviewed the footage with Joan, both of them watching in stunned silence. Between 2 and 4 in the morning, during the darkest hours, Max simply vanished from frame, not walking away, but disappearing like smoke, as if he'd never existed. Then, seconds before dawn, he reappeared in the exact same position, materializing from nothing. "What is he?" Joan whispered, her voice breaking. The question sparked an argument that evening, the worst they'd had in years. Lewis wanted to call animal control themselves, convinced they were harboring something dangerous. Joan was torn between maternal instinct and growing terror. Brenna became hysterical, screaming that they'd promised, that they couldn't betray Max. As their voices rose, Max suddenly moved between them and the front door, blocking the exit with his body. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and then a voice, ancient, commanding, decidedly not canine, echoed simultaneously in all their minds. "Don't. Please. I mean no harm. I never have. I just want to stay." They froze, the argument dying in their throats. Max's form flickered like a failing hologram, showing momentary glimpses of a young man, beautiful and terrible, wearing ancient clothing, his face etched with centuries of suffering, before solidifying back into the dog they knew. Joan screamed. Louis stumbled backward. Max whimpered and retreated to the corner, making himself as small as possible. His amber eyes filled with terror that he'd destroyed his only chance at salvation. The community's hostility reached a fever pitch that felt orchestrated by something darker than mere prejudice. At school, the bullying turned vicious. Eli, Ramon, and Kaya cornered Brenna behind the gymnasium during recess, their faces twisted with a cruelty that seemed too practiced for children their age. They shoved her against the brick wall, their taunts cutting deeper than their fists. "Your demon dog is going to kill you," Eli hissed, "and everyone's going to say you deserved it for being so stupid." When Brenna fought back, scratching Ramon's face, they overwhelmed her with numbers. She came home with a black eye that bloomed purple and yellow, a split lip that bled through dinner, and bruises covering her arms like a constellation of shame. Louis stormed to the school the next morning, but Principal Rihanna deflected with bureaucratic precision. "Mr. Mosley, we've received concerning reports about your home situation. Perhaps Brenna is experiencing stress that manifests as behavioral issues. Children can be cruel when they sense vulnerability." The implication was clear. This was somehow their fault. On Friday, Louis's supervisor, Jesse, called him into the construction trailer. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. But the crew won't work with you anymore. They're saying you've got something cursed in your house, that bad luck follows you. I can't have that kind of talk spreading." The words were apologetic, but the decision was final. Louis cleaned out his locker in silence, his dreams of providing for his family crumbling like the buildings he'd helped construct. That afternoon, Joan discovered her car vandalized in the diner parking lot. "Monster Lovers" was spray-painted across the hood in blood-red letters that seemed to drip like fresh wounds. A dead crow lay on her windshield, its neck twisted at an unnatural angle, with a note pinned beneath. "Your choice, the dog or your daughter." Her hands shook so violently she could barely call the police, who took a report with expressions that suggested they understood why someone might leave such a message. The worst discovery came that evening. Joan found Brenna in the bathroom, frantically scrubbing blood from her school uniform with cold water. "Sweetie, what happened?" But Brenna just sobbed harder, her small shoulders heaving. They said you and Daddy should have gotten rid of me instead of the monster. That I'm the real problem. That everyone would be happier if I just disappeared." Joan gathered her daughter into her arms, both of them crying, while Louis stood in the doorway looking utterly broken. In the corner, Max watched with eyes that held heartbreakingly human anguish. Gwendolyn's petition succeeded. On Monday, Animal Control sent official notification. Officer Rihanna would arrive Thursday morning with authorization to inspect the dog and remove it for potential euthanization based on credible reports of aggressive behavior and public safety concerns. That night, Max disappeared. The family searched frantically, calling his name through dark streets, their voices hoarse with desperation. They returned at dawn, exhausted and heartbroken. Max sat on their porch. Across the street, Gwendolyn Henderson's house was destroyed. Every window shattered. The structure collapsed by what news reports called a freak gas explosion. Gwendolyn was hospitalized for shock. When Louis asked directly, "Did you do this?" Max's amber eyes held unmistakable guilt. The next morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. A woman appeared at their door as Joan prepared breakfast, her presence announced not by a knock, but by a sudden chill that made their breath visible despite the central heating. She was elegant in a way that transcended fashion. Ageless features that could have been 30 or 300, silver eyes that reflected light like a cat's, dressed in clothes that seemed simultaneously modern and ancient, as if time itself couldn't decide what century she belonged to. "I am Leisha," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to echo from somewhere deeper than her throat. "I've come to see the creature you've been harboring." Max, hearing her voice from Brenna's room, bolted with a speed that blurred his form. He crashed into the closet, hiding behind winter coats, his entire body shaking with a terror so primal it was contagious. Brenna ran after him, confused and frightened, while Lewis positioned himself protectively between the stranger and his family. Leisha stepped inside without invitation, and Joan found herself unable to protest, as if the witch carried authority that superseded property rights and human courtesy. "You don't know what you're protecting," Leisha said, her silver eyes scanning the modest home with something between pity and contempt. "Let me illuminate your ignorance." She revealed the truth in pieces, each word falling like a hammer blow. 407 years ago, a vampire prince named Karpov Noctis led a raid on neutral territory during clan wars. Leisha's family, her parents, siblings, cousins, children barely older than Brenna, were slaughtered for the crime of existing in contested feeding grounds. "He didn't even remember their names," Leisha said, her voice cracking with ancient rage. "They were nothing to him. Collateral damage in a war over which monsters got to hunt, which humans." Her revenge had been meticulous. She transformed him into the most despised creature in vampire culture, a helpless animal, dependent on the mercy of others, stripped of power and voice and dignity. "But the true genius," she continued, her smile sharp as broken glass, "was making the curse breakable only by genuine love from a pure heart. In the vampire world, such a thing is categorically impossible. Love is manipulation. Kindness is strategy. Compassion is weakness to be eliminated. I ensured he would suffer this humiliation forever." She turned to Joan with something almost like confusion. "Yet here you are, showing him kindness. Why? You're struggling financially. Your daughter is being tormented. Your family is being destroyed. And still, you keep him." She shook her head. "When that curse breaks, and I can feel it weakening, your daughter's love is eroding 4 centuries of magic. You'll have a vampire prince in your home, an ancient predator responsible for thousands of deaths. Your daughter's compassion is beautiful and utterly wasted on something incapable of change." Brenna stepped forward, her small fists clenched. "You're wrong. He does feel. I see it every single day." Leisha used her power to compel Max from the closet. He emerged trembling, and when she looked into his amber eyes, she saw something impossible, tears streaming down the dog's face. "That's," she whispered, backing toward the door. 400 years should have destroyed any capacity for." She vanished in swirling shadows, leaving only a warning. "The vampire world will come, and they'll destroy everyone he's bonded to." Thursday morning arrived like an execution date. Officer Rihanna pulled up in the animal control van precisely at 9, accompanied by her partner carrying tranquilizer guns and a reinforced cage that seemed designed for something far more dangerous than a dog. The family had barely slept, spending the night in vigil around Max, who sat with unnatural stillness as if he understood exactly what dawn would bring. Brenna was already crying when the officers approached the porch, her arms wrapped around Max's neck in a death grip. "You can't take him," she sobbed. "Please, you can't. He's good. He's family." Rihanna's expression held professional sympathy that did nothing to soften her resolve. "Sweetheart, we have a court order. Multiple complaints have been filed. We need to assess the animal for public safety." She reached out gently to separate Brenna from the dog. "It'll be okay." If he's as harmless as you say, he'll be returned. The moment Rihanna's hand touched Brenna's shoulder, the curse cracked with a sound like reality itself shattering. Max's transformation was both horrific and mesmerizing. His body convulsed, bones breaking and reforming with wet snaps that made everyone's stomach turn. His form stretched and twisted, becoming something caught between beast and man, taller, with elongated limbs that ended in hands tipped with razor claws emerging from dissolving paws. His jaw extended, revealing fangs that grew impossibly long, designed for tearing through more than flesh. Shadows erupted around him like living things, writhing and coiling with predatory intelligence. His amber eyes burst into flame, burning with supernatural fire that cast the morning in hellish light. The roar that exploded from his throat was utterly inhuman, a sound that carried 4 centuries of rage and anguish and suffering compressed into one terrible moment. Rihanna and her partner fled, dropping their equipment, their screams trailing behind them as they dove into the van and sped away. Within minutes, police sirens wailed in the distance, converging on the Mosley home. The family was trapped inside, watching through windows as squad cars surrounded their property, officers taking defensive positions with weapons drawn. But the sirens attracted attention from a far darker quarter. As twilight descended early, unnatural shadows gathered at the street's edge. Figures emerged from the darkness, beautiful and terrible, moving with predatory grace that marked them as fundamentally other. Vampires, a full contingent, their presence causing streetlights to flicker and die. Leading them was a young man who looked eerily similar to Max's half-transformed state. Handsome but cruel, with the same amber eyes turned cold and calculating. He surveyed the scene with aristocratic disdain before speaking, his voice carrying supernatural authority that made the air itself vibrate. "I am Laurent Noctis, Crown Prince of the Blood Court. I've come for my brother." His smile was sharp as broken glass. Not to rescue him, to finish what the witch started. He turned toward the house where Karpov, still caught between forms, wounded and weakening, had positioned himself between the door and the approaching threats. "You were always too weak, brother. You felt things. Mercy, hesitation, conscience. The witch did us a favor cursing you. Your return would only complicate the order I've built." Laurent's gesture was casual, almost bored. "Kill him, and anyone who stands with him." The battle erupted with devastating supernatural violence. Laurent's forces, the vampire warriors Oberon and Ingram, along with the ancient vampires Morticia and Destiny, moved with impossible speed, their forms blurring as they attacked. Karpov stumbled outside to meet them, still caught between shapes, his partially transformed body struggling to respond to commands it hadn't executed in 4 centuries. The suburban street became a war zone. Vampires clashed with superhuman strength that shattered pavement and bent metal streetlights like wire. Shadows moved as weapons, cutting through air with sounds like tearing silk. Karpov fought desperately, but he was weakened, disoriented, his power constrained by the curse that still clung to him like chains. Laurent's claws tore through his half-formed flesh, drawing blood that looked too dark, too viscous to be human. Supernatural weapons pierced his body, each wound weakening him further. Inside the house, the Mosley family watched in horror as the creature they'd called Max was systematically destroyed. Louis's hands clenched and unclenched, his entire body tense with the need to act. I can't just watch this," he muttered, his voice breaking. "That's whatever he is, he's ours." Joan was already moving toward the closet, her face set with grim determination. She retrieved the shotgun they kept for home protection, her hands shaking as she loaded it. "He's family," she said simply, chambering around. "We don't let family fight alone." But Brenna was already at the door, her small hand on the knob. Before her parents could stop her, she ran into the chaos. "Brenna, no!" Joan's scream tore through the night, but her daughter was already across the yard, stumbling past vampires who barely noticed the child weaving through their battle. Laurent stood over Karpov's fallen form, his brother bleeding and broken on the shattered concrete, preparing the killing blow with theatrical slowness. "You should have stayed lost, Karpov," Laurent said, his voice carrying mock sympathy. "At least as a dog, you had purpose, to suffer. As a corpse, you'll have peace. Consider this mercy from your loving brother." Brenna dropped to her knees beside Karpov's monstrous form. Any rational child would have run screaming from the creature before her. Caught between shapes, fangs bared, covered in blood that steamed in the cold air, eyes burning with predatory fire. He looked like every nightmare humanity had ever conjured, every monster parents warned their children about. His partially transformed face was a horror of distorted features, more beast than man, more demon than either. She threw her arms around him anyway. "I don't care what you are," she sobbed into his blood-matted fur and exposed flesh. "I don't care what you look like. I don't care what you've done." Her small body shook with the force of her emotion. "You protected us. You're good. Your family." She pulled back just enough to look into those burning amber eyes. "You're my Max. And I love you." Karpov's fully vampire eyes, ancient, predatory, inhuman, met hers. 407 years of accumulated darkness crashed against one impossible moment of pure, uncalculated love. The curse shattered like glass. Blinding light erupted from Karpov's body, forcing vampires and humans alike to shield their eyes. The sound was like reality itself tearing. A thunderous, musical note that reverberated through both physical and supernatural realms, shaking windows and setting off car alarms for blocks. Leisha, watching from the shadows at the street's edge, screamed as her spell disintegrated, 4 centuries of meticulous magic unraveling in seconds. The light consumed everything, turning night into day, burning away darkness with purifying intensity. When it cleared, a young man knelt where the dog once was. He was beautiful in a terrible way, sharp features that suggested both human ancestry and something fundamentally other, amber eyes that still glowed, but with warmth rather than just predatory hunger, long dark hair falling past his shoulders in tangled waves. Tattered remnants of ancient royal garments materialized with his transformation, a coat of deep crimson embroidered with silver thread, beneath it a shirt that might have been white centuries ago. His skin bore countless scars, a map of suffering made visible, and he trembled violently, overwhelmed by sensation after so long without. "You saved me," Karpov whispered, his voice hoarse and cracking from 4 centuries of disuse. He stared at Brenna with wonder and anguish warring in his expression. Not just from the curse. Tears, his first in longer than he could remember, streamed down his face, cutting clean paths through the blood and dirt. From what I'd become before it, from the monster I was willing to be. His hands shook as he reached toward her, then pulled back, afraid to touch her with fingers that had spilled so much blood. "I don't know if I deserve this, if I deserve you, but I swear, on whatever remains of my soul, I will spend eternity trying to be worthy of your faith." With effort, Karpov stood. The transformation was staggering. Where moments ago there had been a weakened, wounded creature, now stood the true crown prince of the Noctis bloodline. Shadows gathered around him like a living cloak, responding to his will with eager obedience. His presence radiated ancient power that made the air itself heavy, that forced even Laurent's warriors to step back instinctively. This was what 4 centuries of suffering had been hiding. Raw, terrible power that had only grown stronger through suppression. "Brother," Karpov said, his voice carrying weight and authority that made the ground tremble. Laurent's confident smirk faltered. "You wanted my throne badly enough to murder me. You may keep it." Laurent looked surprised, suspicious. "But these humans are under my eternal protection, my blood bond, my sacred oath." His eyes blazed brighter. Touch them. Touch anyone I claim as mine. And you've declared war not just on me, but on every ancient law our kind respects. Even you won't violate blood bonds." With a gesture, Karpov commanded shadows to bind the attacking vampires. Oberon and Ingram froze mid-attack, wrapped in darkness that burned them. Morticia and Destiny retreated, recognizing power far beyond their own. "Leave," Karpov commanded. "Tell the Blood Court that Karpov Noctis has returned. Tell Lord Jorian and Queen Venita their son lives, but belongs to another family now." His voice dropped to something more dangerous. "And tell everyone who might seek revenge, harm those I protect, and remember why I was once feared across continents." Laurent and his forces vanished into the night, their retreat a mixture of fear and calculated withdrawal. The suburban street fell silent, except for the distant wail of sirens that somehow never seemed to arrive. Dawn approached with relentless inevitability, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold that made Karpov flinch visibly. Even ancient vampires had limitations with sunlight, and he'd been too long without proper shelter. But before he left, he knelt before the Mosley family, his hand placed over his heart in a gesture so ancient it predated the founding of nations. "I am blood sworn to you now," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of eternal promises. "An oath that transcends time, death, and the very fabric of supernatural law. You will never want for anything. Your debts will be cleared. Your persecutors will cease. Your lives will be protected by forces older than this country, older than the cities built upon it." He reached toward Brenna, hesitating until she nodded permission, then placed his hand gently over her heart. She felt warmth spread through her chest, something that felt like sunlight and safety woven together. "You gave me back my soul," he whispered. "I didn't think I had one left to save, but you found it buried beneath centuries of darkness. You believed in me when I'd forgotten how to believe in myself." He looked up at Joan and Louis, his amber eyes holding genuine reverence. "Your daughter has a gift, to see the good in broken things. Protect that. Nurture it. The world will try to crush it, to teach her that compassion is weakness. Don't let them win." Before the sun could touch him, Karpov disappeared into shadows, leaving the family standing in their destroyed yard surrounded by evidence of supernatural battle that would be explained away by morning as a gas leak or freak storm. Police cars finally arrived to find confused officers already on scene with no clear memory of what they'd been responding to. The days that followed felt like waking from a nightmare into a different dream. Mysterious letters arrived announcing that anonymous benefactors had paid off the Mosley family's debts. Mortgage, credit cards, medical bills, all cleared to zero. Louis received a job offer from a new construction company with double his previous salary, the supervisor oddly insistent that Louis was exactly who they'd been searching for. Joan was promoted at the diner when Jan unexpectedly transferred to another state, muttering about needing a fresh start with haunted eyes. The town's harassment vanished overnight. People seemed to forget why they'd been angry, conversations trailing off mid-sentence when they tried to remember what had upset them about the Mosley family. Gwendolyn Henderson, released from the hospital, sold her house and moved away without speaking to anyone. Those who did remember, like Riley and Maximilian, suddenly became very polite, very distant, their eyes holding the kind of fear that comes from nighttime visits by things that shouldn't exist. Weeks passed. The family's life transformed so completely, it felt like they'd slipped into a parallel universe. Financial security returned. Social persecution ended. Brenna made new friends, children like Jessie and Ivory who hadn't been part of the earlier cruelty, who accepted her without question. But despite their improved circumstances, Brenna felt a void that prosperity couldn't fill. She missed her friend. One night, unable to sleep, Brenna sat by her window and whispered the word Karpov had taught her before he left. A phrase in a language that predated recorded history, syllables that felt strange on her tongue but somehow right, like her mouth had been shaped to speak them. The word tasted of shadows and starlight, of promises made before humans learned to write them down. The darkness in her room coalesced, shadows gathering like ink dropped in water. And suddenly, he was there. Karpov stood at her window dressed in modern clothes, jeans and a dark jacket that almost let him pass for human, but nothing could completely hide his otherworldly nature. His amber eyes still glowed faintly, his movements still carried that predatory grace, and the air around him seemed somehow denser, more alive. "You called?" he asked, a slight smile playing at his lips. I wanted to make sure you were okay," Brenna said, suddenly shy now that he stood before her in his true form. Karpov's expression softened completely, losing all trace of the ancient predator. "I'm learning to be," he admitted, settling on her windowsill with inhuman balance. "It's strange, feeling again after so long. Caring again. Sometimes the weight of what I've done, the lives I took, the suffering I caused, crushes me. The memories are clearer now, sharper. I remember their faces, Brenna. All of them." His voice cracked slightly. "But then I remember there's at least one person who believes I can be better. That I am better. And somehow that's enough. It has to be enough." They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He helped her with homework, offering historical perspectives from someone who'd lived through the events her textbook reduced to paragraphs. He told her stories from before he became a vampire, when he was just a boy who loved fairy tales and believed in heroes. She told him about her new friends, about how Eli and Ramon had apologized with tears in their eyes, though she suspected supernatural influence more than genuine remorse. As dawn approached and he prepared to leave, Brenna asked the question that had been building. "Are there others like you? Other monsters who just need someone to believe in them?" Karpov's expression darkened with old pain, then softened with new hope. "Yes, many. The supernatural world is vast and full of cursed souls, beings trapped by their nature, by spells, by circumstances beyond their control. Most are beyond redemption. Most don't want to be saved." He paused, studying her with those ancient eyes. "But some might just need what you gave me. Someone willing to see past the monster to the soul beneath." He looked directly forward, as if speaking to someone beyond the walls. This family changed one vampire's fate. Perhaps they could change more, but those are stories for another night. The Girl and the Vampire Prince, an impossible friendship bridging two worlds, proof that compassion could conquer even the darkest curse. If this story moved you, subscribe for more tales where love breaks curses and monsters find redemption.